I can run a card on my phone if you would rather do that. Of course, you can give them some cash too, and they'll pass that on to me. Thank you, brother, for helping keep all that organized. All right, so we're going to go into our second topic this morning, the battle for the mind. Just note for the live stream, I've been getting a couple comments that people can't hear. Have you taken care of that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I've just been getting some messages. We can't hear the live stream.
Yeah.
All right, let's have a word of prayer. Father God, as we continue to study into the plan of Christian education that you've given us, how you want to prepare us for heaven and help our children learn in the way you want them to, we just ask for the guidance of your Spirit. Please open our hearts and minds, understand and apply. Speak through me, I pray, and I ask in Jesus. Amen. How many like TED Talks? All right, we got a few, some interesting stuff on there. TED Talk, your brain plus the cloud equals superhumans. Google engineer predicts nanocomputers connected to the cloud will be implanted in our brains by 2030. That's not far away. Computers connected to the cloud implanted in our brains. Interesting. Nanocomputers implanted in our brains that connect to the cloud will usher in a new era of critical thinking and human advancement. Google's director of engineering predicts in a TED Talk. Now, critical thinking, human advancement, those are good things. I'm not sure I like the method. Ray Kurzweil says that by the 2030s, nanobots embedded through the bloodstream into our brains will create hybrid minds that combine the current power of our brain with the almost limitless processing capacity of cloud-based computers. These microcomputers will help us get quick answers to complex problems and will provide the extra juice needed to come up with creative new ideas. Notice what they're saying here. They want to combine current power of our brains with limitless processing capacity of cloud-based computers. In other words, they're saying the brain is limited, we can do better. That's an affront to God's creation. Elon Musk wants to connect computers to your brain so we can keep up with robots. Who's keeping up with who? But more than that, there's a deeper issue here. Who controls a robot? Is the robot or the robot programmer? Somebody designed that robot to think or act in a certain way. Here's the prediction. With the help of brain implants that are directly linked to computers, humans may be able to improve their brain function, or even one day upload their thoughts or download the thinking of others. Can you imagine? One day I wake up, I just don't really have any good ideas today. James, he has great ideas. I just like think up Google or something and read James' thoughts and download them. That's frightening just to think about the idea, right? Everybody read your thoughts. No, it's not spelled out this way, but think about the implications here. In this sort of system, who would be controlling our thinking? Would we be controlling it, or would be some cloud-based computer system controlling our thinking? You don't have any good thoughts of your own? No problem, just download someone else's. No thinking needed. Christian leadership, page 38 tells us God has given men talents, which he means they should use. He has given them minds, and he means they should become thinkers and do their own thinking and planning rather than depend upon others to think and plan for them. Right. That's key. God gave us a mind. Why? To think, to use. But as we've already discussed, you see plans of education designed to damage thinking abilities. Now, let me clarify. I'm not suggesting this is the future of the world. Pretty soon everybody's going to be controlled by something. I'm not suggesting that. Not going down that conspiracy theory. I'm actually suggesting that the future looks a lot worse than that. Because you see, Satan's been working on controlling the mind for a lot longer than Elon Musk. And if we think this is the real mind control, we miss the real mind control. In fact, studies find we are at the lowest possible level in critical thinking abilities in history. More than 80% of employers said recent graduates were deficient in critical thinking. Another study found less than 1% of high school graduates rated excellent in critical thinking abilities. Less than 1%. And it didn't get much better once you graduated from college. Psychologists tell us that less than half of us, half of the population, are even capable of engaging in formal reasoning. Less than half of the population. But that's who's capable. Who do you think actually does it? I mean, look at the world today. We ask all the time, like, what are they thinking? Maybe they aren't. Tell us only about 5% actually think for themselves. The rest of them just do what everyone does because that's what everyone does. You ask somebody a question, a political question. Very rarely will someone come up with an original answer. Most of the time, they just repeat their party line, right? And even the supposed independent thinking of youth, where they dye their hair pink, ask them why they did it. They can't come up with a good reason. That's not thinking either. And this is important for us to understand. True independent thinking means you have a reason for what you're doing and for making the decisions you make. Independent thinking is not rebellion. Sometimes we think those two are the same, right? If somebody dyes their hair pink and does something crazy, we think, oh, they're independent. No, they're just rebellious. Independent thinking means you have a reason for what you do and for the decisions you make. Now, so what? Is this really a big problem to not be thinkers as a society? We read that moral purity depends on right thinking. Who wants to be morally pure? Don't we want our children to be morally pure? So it depends on being a good thinker. Also, young men must be trained up to be thinkers. So it should be part of the educational process. And God calls upon everyone with whom he works to do the very highest kind of thinking. Moral purity depends on it. It should be part of the educational process. And if we want to work for the Lord, we need to be a thinker. Oh, there's more. Let's go to my favorite book, Education. Again, I encourage you to study this book. It is powerful. Read it at least 10 times. Every human being created in the image of God. Are we all humans here today? Any non-humans? All right, just checking. Is endowed with a power akin to that of the Creator. Now, this word akin, that's a bit of an old English word. We don't say that very often. Someone give me a modern definition. Similar. Okay, yeah. Or we could just say like. So we've been given a power that even our Creator has. God created man in his image, right? So part of this image of God is this power we're about to read about. What is it? Individuality, power to think and to do. The ability to think is something that God himself has. And it says, and here's our key word, individuality. Because when we talk about thinkers, we go in different directions. Maybe you know somebody who's really smart. Are they a good thinker? Not necessarily. They might be, they might not be. Maybe you know somebody with 3 PhDs. Are they a good thinker? Not necessarily. How much information you have in your mind is no guarantee of being a good thinker. The key is this word individuality. Individual thinking is the ability to rationalize something, to think it through, to think about the reasons for a decision, to make that decision, know why you made the decision, and be able to defend that decision. Some people say that faith and reason are separate. But does God expect us to have an evidence-based faith? Absolutely he does, right? Can we point to the Word of God and know the reasons for our belief? So faith is not independent of thinking and reason. There are times because of past evidence that we place a faith in God for something we don't understand, that doesn't mean we're not thinking. We're actually thinking and saying, you know what, God has led me thus far. He has given me enough reasons so far, and so I choose to take faith and have faith. But the key, individuality, power to think and to do. This is vital for the last days, because there's going to come a time, notice from prophecy, when it will feel like we're the only ones who believe in a certain way. The world has gone the wrong direction. We're going to feel kind of alone. And if we have been following the crowd up till that point in time, what's going to happen? We'll just keep following the crowd, right? In fact, it won't be that point in time. It will be over a period of time, right? We'll just continue following the crowd. We won't really even recognize what's happening. You can see this already happening today. But if we are accustomed to basing our beliefs on the Word of God, having evidence for our beliefs, then it won't matter what the world is doing. We'll stand for our belief that the heavens fall. Now, what does this have to do with education? Let's keep reading. Education, page 17. Continuing on. It is the work of true education to develop this power, to train the youth to be thinkers and not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. That's point number 10 in our little booklet. Training thinkers, not mere reflectors. This right here presents contrasting points of true versus false education. We have the work of true education to develop what? Thinkers. And false education to develop reflectors. Now, I have to say, as an educator myself, when I first read this statement, this was my aha moment. I said, oh, this is making sense. Two systems of education, two goals. And as I thought about the systems of education that I had been trained to work in, I saw how carefully it was designed to create a reflector and not a thinker. Year after year, I mentioned earlier, year after year, we give our children textbooks and tell them to do what with it? Just remember it. They listen to lectures day after day. Somebody's already thought of it, just remember it. Where's the discovery-based learning? Where's the reasoning, the questioning? Where's the study for themselves from the Word of God to know what they believe? Hey, this isn't only in school. We do the same thing in church, don't we? We just take what the pastor or so-and-so says rather than studying it out for ourselves from the Word of God. But the fact of the matter is, this is vital for the last days. Let's go to our Bibles. Look at a couple of verses here. Revelation chapter 7. Of course, there's a lot of prophecy involved in Revelation, but here's a couple of verses, fairly easy to understand without a lot of background. Revelation chapter 7, verse 2. I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. He cried with a loud voice to the four angels who was the shepherd of the earth and the sea. Here comes the angel with the seal of God. Who wants the seal of God? Right? Saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God in their feet, shoulders, back of the head, forehead, it says. What does the forehead represent? Mind, thinking, right? Frontal lobe, decision-making abilities. Back this up with science. The anterior cingulate cortex, represented here in the yellow. This is the core of the frontal lobe, important for impulse control, decision-making, emotion, controlling emotional responses, thinking, motivation. But notice the last two items on the list here. Error detection. Recognizing between truth and error. That's important for our Christian. Vital. Center of the free will. This is the moral decision-making part of the brain. God says, I want my seal placed on this. Reality. Same. Right? This represents the area of time. God chosen follower. God says, I know that every decision that these people will make will be from my side. But God's not the only one. You see, the fact of the matter is, the end time battle is a battle over who is controlling the mind. Go to Revelation 14. We read in Revelation 14 about the mark of the beast. And verse 9 says, the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark or in his forehead, mark in his forehead or in his hand. Mark of the beast, that's a whole other topic, we don't have time to study right now, but I'm pretty sure none of us want it. Where is it laid? Forehead or hand, which is it would be happy for us to do it without thinking. That's why it's on the hand also. But both sides of the great God of verse 1, it says sealed up on the forehead. And I mentioned this, some other references, I think of Romans chapter 12, verse 2, be not conformed to this world. In other words, don't be a reflector. But be, who knows the verse? Transformed by the renewing of your mind. Chapter 12, verse 2. Also, 1 Peter 1:13, which says, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind. What did it mean to gird up in Bible times? They had these long flowing garments, right? And they would tie them up so that they could fight, but they could run. And it was talking about strength for warfare. The warfare in which we are engaged is largely mental. We're not fighting a battle with swords and guns. We're fighting a battle over our mind. It was the historian Carter Woodson who said, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You think Satan knows this? Yeah. That's why he pulled them up. There was a great leader who at the height of his career was revered, adored by his nation, voted in by a popular vote, who said, how fortunate for leaders that men do not think. Anyone know who this was? I kind of gave it away with the background picture. Adolf Hitler. How fortunate for leaders that men do not think. We often talk about Hitler, and we think that he forced his way into power by force of arms. No, actually not. He was voted in by the majority vote, using a lot of the same promises we hear in politics today. But here's what's most solemn to think of. It was Christians who voted Hitler into power. Including over 90% of Seventh-day Adventists, by the way. Why? No one was thinking. No one was thinking. Why? We're going to see in a few minutes here. This was actually the result of over 100 years of education in the nation of Russia, with a system designed to make you follow the crowd. It's a special work of Satan in these last days to take possession of the mind. Satan, he pulled out all the stops. And it's up to us, as parents and educators, to counteract it. So let's talk about some practical ways in which thinking abilities are destroyed. 10 thought-destroying tactics. We're going to look at this from the perspective of early childhood development and education. First of all, a lack of physical activity. We've already talked about a lot of the benefits of physical activity. But the fact of the matter is that physical activity directly targets and helps develop the parts of the brain that are responsible for independent thinking. Research tells us that physical activity is more important than the time you spend studying, for little children especially. It impacts the part of the brain called the cerebellum, represented here in the red. This is a very important part of the brain. It is linked with the higher frontal levels in the brain. In fact, I think it's about 40% of the neurons in the cerebellum connect into the frontal lobe. Vital area of the brain for good thinking abilities. It helps with the ability to perform repetitive activities automatically, like handwriting, many cognitive skills, language skills, social interaction, music, and attention abilities. How many have used their cerebellum yet today? A couple of you, that's good. All right, we all have, right? This is a vital part of our brain. We use on a daily basis. We want a well-developed cerebellum. How do we develop it? Physical activity. Well recognized by the science that physical activity targets the cerebellum to help it develop properly. The hippocampus, another vital part of the brain responsible for memory, spatial navigation, behavior, and emotion. Again, physical activity helps develop the hippocampus. The corpus callosum, which is a vital connection between brain hemispheres. Diseases that developmental disorders that affect the corpus callosum are severe in terms of developmental issues. You definitely need a well-developed corpus callosum. It impacts cognition, many motor skills, and sensory information, and much more. Again, physical activity targets this area of the brain. But what's most fascinating, notice the shape of the corpus callosum. It's again connected between the hemispheres. And so now we reverse this image. It would be sitting right here. This is a map showing the different parts of the corpus callosum and their connections into other parts of the brain. Notice the part right here, right at the tip of the corpus callosum, that reaches into what part of the brain is it? The frontal lobe. Okay. This is called the genu of the corpus callosum, or Spanish, the knee, kind of rounded in shape there, but it's right at the tip of the corpus callosum. And this, what the studies have found is that physical activity, I meant to share the quote, but physical activity directly helps develop the genu of the corpus callosum. What they found is that children who are more active have more white matter microstructure or myelination in the genu of the corpus callosum. In other words, physical activity was directly affecting thinking ability. Very important for children. What kind of physical activity? You know what mother holds her baby and rocks it. It's developing the brain. And what do we want to do now, right? There's been such an, we're going to talk more about this later, something that to break this bond of mother and child, right? Just put the baby to cry themselves to sleep and sleep in their own. God designed them to be held and moved so that the brains. Crawling helps develop handwriting skills, reading abilities, and on down the list. Crawling is essential for development. So much so that we now understand crawling can be used as treatment for learning disabilities. A 9 or 10-year-old child has learning disabilities. They will often have them crawl and have them do activities that use both hands, like working in the garden or throwing things or jumping or running or climbing, or all of that helps in the same way that crawling does. We're always in such a hurry to get our kids walking, right? God made it to crawl. That's good. Spinning, hanging upside down, things that children just love to do, right? Is essential for the development of their brains. After birth, physical activities are one of the child's main means of advancing physical, intellectual, and emotional. You should encourage many forms of body movements. And as we talked about already, agriculture is one of that. It involves the entire body and it is an excellent form of development, physical activity. Point number 2, overstimulation. This has become a major problem today in the world. Overstimulation simply means overwhelming the mind with too much input. You say, well, how could I do that? Well, they find too many toys. Children have so many toys nowadays, so many things to do. We try to keep them occupied because the parents are too busy and don't want to be spending the time with children, right? Did you know they find the more toys the child has, the more bored they get? True. Kind of backwards, right? But it's absolutely true. If a child just has a couple of toys, they learn to focus and develop their powers of attention. If they always have something to jump to, well, they don't develop their powers of attention. You see ADHD and other attention problems, and they get bored for it. Too much in the schedule. We're so worried again because of our information-based mindset of education. We want to make sure we teach them this and we teach them this, and we have soccer and we have music and we have dance and we have swimming and we have on down the list. And children are overwhelmed with all this sensory input. It is harmful to the development of the brain. Too much school, we'll talk about that in a moment, and media in and of itself is overstimulating. And National Survey of Children's Health found 20% increase in anxiety for children between the ages of 6 and 7. Not dealing with anxiety and stress. They're meant to be happy children. But a lot of this is due to the overstimulated lifestyle. And what happens is we begin to overload the mind with so much input, the brain just can't handle it. And we start to see problems like stress, like overactivity, hyperactivity, frustration, being irritable and grouchy, overtired, and of course, superficial thinking. these are things that we see in childhood today that we did not historically. Maybe a few cases here and there, but this is the general rule in children now, that they're hyperactive, they're stressed, they're frustrated, they're irritable and grouchy all the time. It's a result of the overstimulated lifestyle. What children need is to go back to nature. A simple, quiet environment where they have a chance to play and explore on their own time without being pressured to go from one thing to another. And think of the illustration that Dr. Keeley shared about the little toddler who had 8 blocks. And he lined them up in a row and counted them one direction, it's 8. Counted them the other direction, it's 8. He stacked them up into a tower. He counted them up, it's 8. He counted them back down, it's 8. Okay. And he was satisfied that 8 was always 8, no matter which direction he counted it from, and he ran off. Well, what if the mom had stopped him in the middle of that activity and said, hey, it's time to go learn math? What was he learning? Jay was learning math, right? And there's so many opportunities in everyday life for children to learn academic things, but we make it so separated and we wonder why the children have problems with learning. Quietness, calmness, and freedom from artificial excitement build strength in nature. Too much study is another factor. It definitely can be overstimulating, but I've made it a separate point because it's very important to mention. And that's not to say study is bad. Study is a very good thing. It needs to be at the appropriate age. We'll talk more about that later. But certainly you can have too much of a good thing. Now, what we see earlier, the time should be divided, right, between book learning and practical work. So we need to make sure we don't have too much of even a good thing. Too much study is linked to superficial learning, burnout, illnesses, learning disabilities, and a lot more. So our tendency when a child has learning disabilities is to give them more tutoring, more homework, more study. But that's actually what caused the problem. We need to give them less of what is causing the problem. Point number 4, testing. Now, I know we have a few teachers here. Testing is great. Teachers like to have. And I'm not saying it should never be used as a way to measure something. But in general, we use it far too much. And we tend to rely on testing as a means of helping them learn, when in reality is no. Testing does not actually help children learn. It can actually make it worse. And it can affect thinking abilities significantly because everybody's getting measured by the same standard. Think of, there may be some teachers here familiar with a little book that was written called First Grade Takes a Test. Anyone seen that one? Oh, okay. Great little story about a group of first graders taking a test. And there are questions on the test. I don't remember all of them, but what does a rabbit eat? Multiple choice. Carrots, lettuce, wood, a couple of obvious wrong ones. And so the obvious choice was, lettuce. Well, and the little boy's like, no, rabbit eat broccoli. Because my rabbit eats broccoli. No right or wrong answer to that question. Wasn't any need to standardize all the children to think that rabbits eat lettuce when maybe the rabbit wanted to eat broccoli. And another question, what do firemen do? Fight fires, and then a whole bunch of firemen don't do. And the little boy goes, no, firemen help get your head, or get you out of a pipe if you get stuck in it, because my dad got stuck in a pipe and the fireman helped him out. And, no right or wrong answer to that. So standardized testing can make all children think and react in the same way, and that's not God's design. There's a little story for a fair selection. Everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Who's going to succeed? Monkey? Who will fail? Definitely the fish. The dog, probably the elephant, right? Not a very fair test, is it? Well, you see, the story goes, once upon a time, the animals decided they needed to do something to meet the demand. So they organized a school. They adopted a curriculum with 4 subjects. running, swimming, climbing, and flying. Good animal school, right? All the animals wanted to get good grades, so they all tried very hard. They were all highly motivated learners. Well, the duck, he was excellent at swimming and flying, in fact, better than his teacher. But he lagged behind in running, so he had to stay after school to practice that subject. Well, then his webbed feet got so worn out from running that he was only average at swimming. Poor little duck. Then there was the squirrel. You have squirrels here in Trinidad? Yeah. All right. At the start of the year, he was first in his class in climbing and running, and second only to the duck at flying. He developed some pretty serious frustration with choosing the flying class because the teacher made him start at the ground and fly to the top of the tree. And the squirrel said, "That is not how you fly. You climb up the tree and you jump and fly down." He's always in arguing with his teacher. And to make matters even worse, as squirrels are wont to do, he was constantly squirming and chattering in his class, and he had difficulty paying attention. He was diagnosed with a learning disorder. He was eventually placed in remedial class, had to be medicated in order to continue. The rabbit started at the top of his class in running, but had a nervous breakdown because of so much makeup work and swimming. The fox was a natural in his running class, scored well in climbing and swimming, but became so frustrated at his inability to get good grades at flying that he began assaulting his classmates. He developed anger issues. He even tried to eat duck. His behavior was so disruptive, he was expelled from school and wound up in a center for animal delinquents. The elephant, meanwhile, developed low self-esteem because he couldn't do well in any of the subjects. He sank into clinical depression. His therapist persuaded him to try a different school to focus on subjects like lifting and carrying. But the elephant was disappointed because careers in lifting and carrying are not as prestigious as the careers in running and flying and climbing and swimming. He always felt inferior, but he did manage to make a decent living and support his family. Then there was a problem group, the prairie dogs. They stayed out of school and fought the taxes because the administration would not add the burrowing to the curriculum. They apprenticed their children to a badger and later joined groundhogs and the gophers to start a very successful private school. Never happened, but can we take it seriously? Yeah. Has God made every animal different? Yeah. It'd be crazy to put them through a program like that. Has God made every child different? Parents, do you get your children confused? Man, I can't figure out which one is which. God made them different. That's not an accident, right? God doesn't just hold like, man, I can't figure out how they keep coming out different. I want to be the same. No, God designs diversity.
Amen.
Why? Because God has a unique place for every child in His Word. And when we put them through a program that makes them all the same way, that is an affront to God's creative design and taking away their ability to fill that place God. That I have more faith in standardized tests if I knew any standard children. Comparative assessments create artificial hierarchies that promote unnecessary competition and discourage students from learning. And that's an interesting fact. But these actually don't even discourage students from learning. Dr. David Elkin, the great child, wrote, the factory model of education ignores individual differences in mental abilities, learning traits, learning styles. Interesting analogy, factory model, just turning them out all the same, right? Children are pressured to meet uniform standards as measured by standardized tests. Those who cannot keep up with the system, as indicated by the test, are often regarded as defective vessels and are labeled learning or ADHD. Education is reforming, which means more basics, more hours, more homework, more testing. More anything the problem. It's a classic case of the cure being worth. We think we need to do more to make them better, but that's actually what caused the problem in the first place. Now, here's one of the important connections to good thinking abilities. Under these circumstances, children discover very quickly that passing tests rather than meaningful learning is what school is all about. I mean, I love learning. I love studying, but I learned something when I went to university, and that is if I wanted to keep my 4.0 grade point average, that meant studying really hard in the evening, taking the test the next morning, and an hour later forgetting everything I wrote down in that test. They got to move it. Not the only one. I had learned that learning wasn't the important part. It was passing the test. And I came to that from a very unconventional, more true education-based learning environment as a child. You know, imagine how they go through this from an early age. It's completely the test. They're not really they kill their love of learning. The memorizing necessary for these tests is an entire process, is a linear process that does not require entire brain use. Rote memory is a straight line process requiring none of the depth of understanding that comes from whole brain activation. Short, rote memory does not require thinking. And we need to be careful about this. I know there's a lot of parents here who want their children to memorize the Bible. This is excellent. We need to be careful, even in our memorization of the Bible, that we don't do it in a rote way that doesn't require thinking. We need to be stuck in understanding it and Ms. Doris Bromberg, Director for Early Childhood Education at Hofstra University, said there's no evidence that standard access make a difference in learning. Who's benefiting from that? Our corporations, publishing companies. Oh, in there. All right, point number 5, poor health and nutrition. There's a lot we could talk about here. Certainly, what we eat has a profound impact on our health. And I could go through so many studies that they've done in schools where they change the diet of the children and they learn so much better. A large study was done, over 1 million participants, I think it was, in New York, where they took out artificial flavors, preservatives, and dyes from the school lunches. Nothing changed, right? It wasn't a change of diet necessarily. They just made sure they didn't have those additives, artificial additives. Those students did 14% better on IQ tests. Imagine if it's an entire diet sheet, right? God gave us a beautiful plan of diet right there in the beginning. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, you know, mangoes definitely was in there. And this is good for the development of the brain. Just for a couple other examples, we know that green leafy vegetables very important for the development of the hippocampus, which is part of the brain important for memory. Of course, starting in infancy, no breast milk, absolutely what God designed is the constantly changing substance that reacts to the needs of the infant. It's incredible how God has designed that. And sugar, we know, very significantly negatively affects the development of the brain. Basically, any refined foods, that can be oils, sugars, refined grains, even negative for the development of the brain. Number 6, talk about age segregation. An interesting one. It's interesting how something can become so common that we assume it's good. You know what I mean? Something is new, but it just becomes ubiquitous. Everybody does it. We think, well, that's just the way it is, and it must be good. That's the case with age segregation. You see, throughout history, children learned in the family. What their parents couldn't teach, grandparents or aunts and uncles did. It was in the context of the family. But then along came compulsory education. That changed a few things. Maybe you stated here from Dr. Jay Philman and Peter Gray. The place for children in separate classes with others the same age is a fairly recent phenomenon. Age segregation did not occur in full force until the advent of compulsory education laws brought a large influx of children to the public school system. This is in the late 1800s. With millions of children coming into the school system, and you had to organize them somehow. What's the logical way to organize children? By age, right? That doesn't make it good. Never until the 20th century have young people been largely separated from the ongoing productive activities of society. See what we're doing here? They used to learn within the family, or maybe a one-room schoolhouse. But now we've separated them from that environment. They're surrounded with others who are the same age, who have basically the same skill set, learning from one more competent individual in the form of a teacher, it's damaging socially and it's separating them from productive activities of society. This isn't real life, though. Does such division take place naturally anywhere? In industry, do all 21-year-old laborers work separately from 20 years old or 23-year-olds? In business, are there separate rooms for 30-year-old executives and 31-year-old executives? Where on earth was this idea conceived? Notice what he said, it's more socially damaging than segregating children by year, 14 or often 18 years. What is the number one argument given in favor of age segregation? Why do children need to be with other children the same age? Socialization, right? He says, no, it's not helping them socially, it's hindering them socially. Talk more about that in a moment. The Direct Developmental Psychologist led by Vygotsky, he developed something known as the zone of proximal development. Anyone who studied teaching and psychology probably is familiar with it. Zone of proximal development. It is defined as children develop primarily by attempting tasks they can accomplish only in collaboration with a more competent people. So if they're working with someone more competent than they are, they're in this zone of proximal development. And it said that this is where the majority of cognitive development takes place. We imagine here, let's take a little 2-year-old child, 3-year-old child, and he's toddling along and he finds a ball. And he picks his ball up and he toddles along and he finds another 3-year-old. And he says, hey, stop there for a second. Let's play a game of catch. So they back up and they start throwing his ball back and forth. Is that possible? They're 3 years old? No, I don't think so. They don't have the motor abilities to be able to play this game of catch. Right? Not yet. I mean, no, this little 3-year-old picks up his ball, he goes along. Oh, so I should mention. With the 2-3-year-olds, no zone of proximal development. The game fizzles, no cognitive development happens there. But this little 3-year-old, he picks up the ball, he carries along, he finds an adult or a young person. Hey, let's play a game of catch. Is the game of catch possible? Absolutely it is. That young person can instruct the little, he carefully throws the ball. And when the little one makes a crazy throw, he goes, picks it up and carries it on the game of catch, right? Now we have a zone of proximal development. Because it was a task that the child can accomplish. Here we are, tasks they can accomplish only in collaboration with a more competent individual. With the 2-3-year-old children, no zone of proximal development. It's not going to learn very much, other than he can't play catch. But when you have an older one and a younger one, now you have a possibility that a lot more learning that takes place. So they actually find fixing the ages, and I want to clarify, there are some benefits of age integration with other children and young people, like a mixture of ages of young people. But you'll actually find greater benefits if it is a full blending of ages within the context of the family. Right? Parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, young people, children, all of them together. That's how God designed it. That's how God created family. And you actually find that children do better academically. A lot of this has to do with their developing good thinking skills. Because they relate to different ages, different abilities. You also have the older ones helping the younger ones learning things from the older ones, greater maturity, things like that. Better self-esteem. You know, in the age segregated environment, you're just a number. You're just one of many. In an age mixed environment, you're a unique individual. And socialization skills. They actually find children are better socialized in an age mixed environment than in age segregated. Dr. Larry Shires, quite famous for his research on socialization, took up the scientific community. The results seem to show that a child's social development depends more on adult contact and least on contact with other children as previously thought. We used to think, he admitted, yeah, we used to think that children need to be with other children at the same age for social development. He said, we now realize that it's absolutely false. It actually depends more on adult contact than on child-to-child contact. I think it was, or was it, on a blank on the other meeting. They may have worked together. I don't remember exactly the context of the study, it's been quite a while ago. But they compared 2 groups of children and ran socialization assessments on them. And they had a group of children from one side of the spectrum, the public school, and then they went to the other side of supposedly the other side of the socialization spectrum and went to the homeschoolers, who supposedly don't have good socialization, right? And so they ran those citation assessments. Public school students scored in the 27th percentile on those citation assessments. Homeschoolers, 88th percentile. 3 times better socialized. That, you know, that doesn't really go along with what we always used to think. But it's absolutely true, and there's a lot more that we could add to that. I was talking with a friend who's a professor and said, look, what's our goal in raising children? Do we want them to stay children, or are we raising them to be adults? What do you think, parents? Raising them to be adults? I know there's moms here like, I want my baby to grow up. You want your child to be an useful citizen as an adult, right? As my friend said, look, children don't learn how to be adults from other children. We learn from adults. If we want to prepare them for real life, they need exposure to real life. If we want them to act like adults, they need to be around adults. And again, God created the family and aged naturally, and think about it, as Dr. John Taylor Gatto, our teacher, John Taylor Gatto, put in his book, Dumbing Us Down. A close study of what big people were up to was always the most exciting. Wasn't it? Well, back in the day, you couldn't wait to see what grandpa was up to or dad was doing, and we're kind of losing that. Sad. All right, point number 7. We're looking again, things that are damaging the ability to think. We've seen a lot already. Television and electronics. You think this affects the ability to think? Major, right? We're going to see tomorrow, I think, yes, tomorrow morning. Don't miss tomorrow morning. We're going to do iChild, looking at how media is affecting the development of the brain. Let me mention a couple of points here because it definitely fits into this topic. Children spend more time with electronic media than they do in any other activity aside from sleep. Young people spending more time in media than any other activity, period, including sleep. And you know, more than eating, more than school, more than playing outside, more than time in character development. Well, it is actually character development. Time in media is just development character direction. It's quite a lot that they spend. But now a lot of attention has been given to bad content in media. And that's certainly a consideration, but we can't just write it off and be like, yeah, it's okay, as long as they're watching a nature program or as long as they're doing something educational. The fact of the matter is, even supposedly good content media is negatively affecting the development of the brain. We'll call that Dr. Nicholas Cardara is one of the world's elite addiction specialists. He wrote the book Glow Kids. I definitely recommend that book. And he says, I have worked with hundreds of heroin addicts and crystal meth addicts. And what I can say is, if you treat a heroin addict, you treat an addict. Any parents give their children heroin? Oh, yeah, I didn't think so. And we hand them something even more addictive. We need to take a hard look at this. So again, that is you can get. We'll cover that tomorrow, but only 1 hour. And this iPad series covered in 3 hours. Want more information on that topic? You can go. That. Point number 8, education chiefly of the mind. Now, we talked about this earlier. We need education focusing on mental, physical, and spiritual. What happens is when we focus just on the development of the mental powers, we actually end up weakening the mental powers. Badly. But in education derived chiefly from books, is anything wrong with books? No, I love books. But if that's the only source of education, it leads to practical work encourages both observation and interest thoughts. Point number 9, the lack of training. So it needs. Don't micromanage me. Like I remember I was at work at a family one time. They were doing some things. A little child went to pick up this box. Mom like, oh, you won't be able to pick that up. It's too heavy for you. And I thought to myself, you know, it'd be better to let him just try, right? He'll learn a little bit. He'll learn some cost effectiveness. As well as the second point, let them learn the story. Let them discover things. Figure things out for themselves. Now, clarify, I don't mean by themselves, right? But for themselves. You should be there, guiding and helping, but not micromanaging, you know, I mean, like, oh, that's too heavy for you. Let them give it a try. Let them discover things for themselves. And allow them to make some minor mistakes. This is probably harder for the parent than it is to find. Because you see it coming, right? You see that glass just tipping off, and then you know it's going to break when it hits the floor. If you allow it a couple times and don't clean it up for them, right? They tip it off, they have to pick it up. What did they just learn? Cause and factories. That forms a basis for independent. And this, do we want children to make good moral decisions? They learn moral decisions, practical experience. They learn every action has a consequence. And they understand that practically through dropping things, through making messes and stuff like that, they will learn to apply those things morally. But the problem is we have a tendency today to micromanage the practical and leave them to decide whatever they want to morally. You notice this? Parents are like, well, I can't do anything about it. It's their decision. Although we micromanage and not let them get hurt, not let them get dirty, not let them get muddy or anything like that. We should actually reverse that. Let them get dirty, laundry, and they learn some practical skills. Not to mention Michael Heck here, and we talk about that. But when it comes to moral decision making, that's where they need the extra guidance. Point number 10. Well, topic number 10 is a really big one. It causes an inability to think formally, disorganization of the brain, learned helplessness, many learning disabilities, many eye problems, burnout, school dropout, a lack of spirituality, a major cause for young people in the church, a major cause for lack of thinking skills. What is it? You'll have to come this evening. Let's wrap up. You thought I was kidding, didn't you? Come back this evening. We're going to explore that topic in depth. I want to finish up in the last 25 minutes that we have to look at this battle a little bit more, especially in light of the current system that we're working with. We've seen that it is the work of true education to develop the power of thought, to be thinkers and not mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. We've seen there's a great controversy. There's a system of false education and a system of true education. I want to go back to this statement that we saw earlier by Dr. E.A. Sutherland in his contrasting true versus false education and looking at the work of the Counter-Reformation. We saw the following methods of teaching are characteristic of the Jesuit schools. The memory cultivated as a means of keeping down free activity of thought and clearness of judgment. So what was the goal here? To damage good thinking abilities, right? To prevent good thinking abilities from developing. Why? To counteract the work of the Protestant Reformation. But what did they do to accomplish that? What does it say was cultivated? The memory. And we see that today. Is that the focus of education today? It's almost the only focus, right? Just on memory. Might we be inadvertently following these same methods that were to work against Protestant Reformation today? I'm going to clarify, I'm not criticizing any particular religious denomination or the Catholics or anything like this. I'm pointing out this is what the work done to counteract the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, we've seen this already, but a student can make a brilliant display of resources for well-stored memory and reach the highest point. Originality, independence of mind, love and truth, fertility, faith, the power of reflecting, forming correct judgments were not merely neglected, they were suppressed in the Jesuit system. Now, compare this to education. Let's go back to that book, page 230. For ages, education has had to do chiefly with the memory. This faculty has been taxed to the utmost, while the other mental powers have not been correspondingly developed. We need holistic education involving the whole being. Students have spent their time laboriously crowding the mind with knowledge, very little of which could be utilized. Here's what's fascinating, continuing. The mind thus burdened with that which it cannot digest and assimilate is because of educational methodologies out there, well-intentioned ones, but they quote very specific and they say, well, the child mind is like a sponge, isn't it? Yeah, it absolutely is like a sponge. But they take this kind of the wrong direction and they say, what we do is information while they're young and then use it someday. Part of that, which cannot assimilate is we can. What if we stop the other statements we read earlier? Is the use they make of knowledge that determines the value of their education. They need to be putting it into practice. And again, this goes back to our information-based mindset of education. And friends, we can do this with true education too. We think we should change the content, but we still use the same methods, pouring in information into the mind. That's not enough. You use it, putting it into practice. It becomes incapable of vigorous self-reliant effort and is content to depend on the judgment of self. Do we want that? Do we want our children to be content to depend on the judgment for self others? Do we want them to be independent? The education that consists in the training of the men, tending to discourage independent thought, has a moral bearing which is too little appreciated. Notice the prophet. As the student sacrifices the power to reason and judge for himself, he becomes incapable of discriminating between truth and error and false, easy trait to deception. He's easily led to false conclusions. Notice what happens here. First of all, he sacrifices the power to reason and judge for himself. He relies on someone else to feed the information. Secondly, he'll soon become incapable of discriminating between truth and error. Why? Because he's relying on someone else to tell him what's truth and error. Soon, it's easy to be deceived, right? Relying on someone else. Then he's easily led to follow tradition. That's not the direction they want to go, I'm pretty sure. None of us here want that to happen. This has a moral consequence. Now, let's go. We've already seen this. The measuring public to keep down creativity, thought, and suggestion. That was written about the time of perspective of the time of the Protestant Reformation, Counter-Reformation. This is in the 1500s. Let's fast forward in history. Let's go to the 1800s. Education should provide the means to destroy free will. Wow, who said that? Johann Gottlob Fichte, in his address to the German nation, said, if you want to influence the student at all, you must do more than merely talk to him. You must fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will. They kind of took the ideas of the Counter-Reformation and amped them up, right? Notice the year, 1807, they were taking ideas about 250 years old, more or less. Well, they actually went back a lot farther than that, but they, and this was the beginnings of what is referred to as the Prussian educational system. You have studied it, but the German nation, this was the area of the world known as Prussia. This was the Prussian educational system, a system with many similar ideas to that Counter-Reformational system of a couple hundred years earlier. It was a system designed, note the place, Germany. It was a system designed to create a great nation of industry with a population who would work and do what they were told. What was the result? We've already seen it. 125-ish years later, Adolf Hitler says how fortunate for leaders that men do not think. In the same place. 100 and some years of education have done their job well, creating a population where even the Christians weren't thinking and voted this man into power. And I find it fascinating, the location. Germany. Who has studied the Protestant Reformation? I'm curious. Okay, not a lot. Germany. This nation was first in Reformation, Martin Luther. This nation was first in starting Christian school, Melanchthon. I don't know how many of you know that history. Melanchthon started Christian school. It was key in converting the nation of Germany in under one generation. First, in inventing the printing press and distributing Bibles, Gutenberg. Strong Christians, they were not afraid to be different and stand for their beliefs. And then we see 300 plus years later, the entire nation, swayed by the rhetoric of one thing, loving, adoring, voting him into power, only to be nearly ruined by this collective affection. Why? Because education had done its job. And it's interesting to me that Satan made such a bold attack on the bulwark of Protestantism. Do you think he might next turn his attention to the next world center of the bulwark of Protestantism, called the United States of America? That's exactly what happened. Study your history. You can go and trace the leaders of the American educational institution, as well as the British, which were quite here, right? They pretty well cover the world between Britain and Prussia and the American system. They traveled to Prussia to study their ideas and bring them back. The school reorganized, Elwood Coverley, Public Education in the United States, written in 1934. The school reorganized its teaching along lines dictated by the new psychology of instruction which had come to it from abroad. Where was abroad? Prussia. Beginning around 1880 to 1885, our schools began to experience a new but steady change in purpose. What was the change in purpose? Circulating information from the U.S. Bureau of Education referred to the problem of educational schooling. Wait, I thought it was supposed to be that's a problem. Decrying the fact that inculcating knowledge enables the masses to be able to perceive and calculate their griefs. Such an enabling is bound to retard the growth of industry. Oh, let's get insight into the motivation. Rockefeller General Education Board, 1913. We know the Rockefeller name, right? Huge names in industry, one of the wealthiest families on the planet. And it's interesting to me that they had a general education board. What would they care about education in 1913? Industry. In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. They were one of the greatest influencers of the public education in the United States. William Torrey Harris. William Torrey Harris was, he started the whole idea of the kindergarten, basically, got that going as an established fact in the United States. He got the high school as part of the educational process going in the United States. He was the Commissioner of Education for the United States for 17 years. He knows what he's talking about. He said 99 students out of 100 are automata machines. Careful to walk in prescribed paths, careful to follow prescribed customs. This is not an accident, but the result is they knew exactly what was going on. I mean, they intended to not create a thinker, but actually damage it. And along came social scientists. Hey, we can jump in on this. How can we control society? It is the work of schools to collect little plastic lumps of human dough, private households, and educate them. It is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality than they have now, even in totalitarian countries. Fichte laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmaster. Pretty horrible stuff. It's reality. Doesn't it though help us understand why the push to get children earlier and earlier? I recognize there's a better. That's another issue that needs to be addressed. The fact of the matter is, as a system, it is not the time. Please understand, I'm not talking about individual teachers. We have wonderful teachers that work in the system who are doing the best for their children. But as a system, it was not designed for the children's best interest. Say, school system is broken. I say, no, actually, I think it's doing quite well at what it's designed to do. What we need is a different system. We need a different system. And that system is going to look a lot like this. The family was broken, exactly. Until we have a restoration of the family, we're not going to restore. And God gave us a perfect model in Deuteronomy. Parents, these words, what the command they to say, put them in your heart. In other words, become the example to your children. And then teach them how? Class twice a week? No, diligently. When? All day, every day. Sitting, walking, flying, rising up. It's interesting of the attack on the family. I mentioned that before I close. I want to cover changing conceptions of education, 1909. The attitude toward control of the child is likely to change. Each year, the child is coming to belong more to the state and less to the parent. The plea in defense that the child is my child will not be accepted much longer by society. How right was he? Wow. It's attributed, the author is uncertain here, it's attributed thanks to John Dewey, father of modern public education. If the public school can keep children occupied from 7 or 7:30 in the morning throughout the day with sports after school and homework in the evening, parents will have less than an hour a day with their children. And the families of the churches influence over them could be broken. The position of the parent is one of the most responsible. Yet it is far too lightly regarded by the majority of the world. The future of the rising generation is in the hands of parents, for in great measure the old within their control, the destiny of their children will be time for eternity. The salvation of the young depends almost wholly upon training. Parents, what are you holding in your hands? Eternal thing. All responsibility. And teachers too, they're not the parents. Second, Horace Mann, interesting character. He was highly influential. He said, we then who are engaged in the sacred cause of education, he actually got that right, it is a sacred cause, are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause. Doing what? Giving hostages. It's language of war. But who gives hostages to the other side willingly? That's kind of backwards. Hostages are taken, not given. By force. Which incidentally is what they had to do at first in development. I think the history in the US is fascinating. It was resisted quite forcibly. But not anymore, right? Parents willingly giving hostages. The rest, of course, and I think development in public education. But one part of this fascinating, huh? Controversy, this battle over our children's minds is war. I think the statement says never before was there so much at stake. Never was the result so mighty, depending upon the generations. How these now come back. We're at the end of time. We don't have much time. We need to make every moment count. Now, in closing, we've read this statement. It is the work of true education to develop this power, to train you to be thinkers and not merely reflectors of other men's thought. We've seen things that are counteracting good thinking abilities. We've seen it in the school system. Certainly, we run the danger of applying these things in our homes too. We need to be careful about that. We're going to continue studying this throughout the weekend. But I want to not stop right here. I want to continue reading this statement, and I encourage you to look it up in the book Education, page 17. Get the book if you don't have it already. But it tells us what to do instead. It says, instead of confining their study to that which men have better written, let students be directed to the sources of truth. What do we have as the sources of truth? Bible, nature, practical work, things like this, right? To the vast fields open for research, nature, and revelation. Let them contemplate the great facts of duty and destiny, and the mind will expand and strengthen. Instead of educating weaklings, institutions of learning may send forth men strong to think and act, men who are masters and not slaves of circumstance, men who possess breadth of mind, clearness of thought, and courage, the courage of their convictions. Notice, what did they study? sources of truth. Vast fields of research in nature and revelation. Let's talk about the book of Revelation, the Bible. It's talking about God's revealed word to us, right? And then this is an interesting one. Contemplation of the great fact of duty. What duty? Okay, that can be daily, right? I think this also is applying to more of a bigger picture. What is God's will for me? Purpose. There's a statement that says, it is the first lesson of true education. Know and understand the book. Parents, are you teaching your children to know God's will? We have to forget about that, right? For the first 15 years of their life, they learn all this other stuff, and then it's like, okay, now you need to decide what to do with your life. You better start praying for God's will. Who can learn to know God's will from day one? Talk about, by the way, on Sunday. Talk about how we can know God's will, how we can teach our children these things. Duty, what's God's will for me? And then destiny. We have two options for destiny, don't we? I don't think we got that. We have two options for destiny. Yeah. This world or heaven. Doesn't end very well if we just focus on this world. Are our children being prepared for a higher destiny? And if they're studying this, what will be the result? The mind will expand and strengthen. Well, men strong to think and act. Masters, not slaves of circumstance. They'll have a breadth of mind, clearness of thought, courage. The things we need to generate like this. Power to discriminate between right and wrong we can possess only through individual dependence upon God. Each for himself is to learn it from him through his word. God wants us to be connected to him, studying his word for us. And the greatest one of the world is one of them. Who will not be bought or sold. When their inmost souls are true and honest, who do not feel the call, fear to call him by his right name, whose conscience is true to duty as a needle to the pole. Are these reflectors or thinkers? These are thinkers, right? And this is what we need in a generation that will finish the work. We're in a battle, parents, teachers. We are in a battle. Thankfully, we've been given help to win the battle. God has given us instruction. He's promised to help us. He said, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth liberally and upbraideth not. Parents, are you clinging to promise? Lord, give me wisdom. Help me win this battle for the souls of my children. Help me prepare them for their calling and their destiny. Help me teach them to be an independent thinker. And I'll close with this one point to mention. We want our children to stand as Daniel and not be afraid to be different. Amen? How can we expect our young people to be different? We ourselves need to be able to take those hard decisions and those hard steps to educate our children differently from the world, so they can see it in everyday life, and they will develop a habit of seeing their faith later on. All right, it's lunchtime. I'm hungry. Well, let's take a break. Our break is from yes, all the way till 2 o'clock. All right, so I encourage you, get some good food, not too much. Class afterward, and get some exercise, fresh air. Amelia is going to have the program afterwards on national revenue. Thank you very much.